If you want to change your life, change your habits. I'm Shireen Skeepers, founder of For Your Life and host of this podcast dedicated to exploring and understanding the power of habits. Join me as I speak with experts and everyday people who have transformed their lives through the power of habit. Because this is For Your Life. This is about habits and it's about time. Your time starts now.
I have never had somebody come in and go, Kieran, my family are the best. I feel great. My work is wonderful. I've got too much money, if anything. Also, my back hurts. It's never happened. It's never happened in the history of ever.
Is our stress causing our pain, or is our pain causing our stress? How could we ever truly know the answer to that question? Maybe the answer can be found in gaining a deeper understanding of the mind-body connection. In this episode, I talk with chiropractor Dr. Kieran Whelan about all things mind and body, in particular, how lifestyle factors and stress impact our health and well-being. Dr. Kieran Whelan, lovely to see you today. Thank you for coming in to talk about the wonderful and exciting world of chiropractics. So let's begin at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you become interested in chiropractics.
Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me. My family started to go and see a chiropractor when I was quite young. My sister started getting migraines when she was, I think, like 12 or something like that. And Mum and Dad took her to our GP, who we had a great relationship with. And he said, look, really the only options I can give her are to take these medications, and she probably need to take them every day and just hope for the best with it. And Mum and Dad said, look, we really don't want to give a girl who's just starting her teenage years medication every day. Like, what else can we do? And he said, go and see a chiropractor or something. I'm not quite sure. So on their way home, drove past, there happened to be a chiropractic practice that was there. And they drove in and she happened to have an appointment and Alex was able to get in. And she started having a migraine while she was there within the practice. The chiropractor was checking her out and was like, okay, I think we can see what's going on through here, and started working with her. And she's, to this day, she still doesn't get any migraines. And then I fell off a swing set because I was only a little kid at the time, and that was how I started going. And then we had always just kept going, and my chiropractor kept saying to me, you should look into it. This is something you should do. She was like, come and observe. And so I would go and see how she was practicing. And then when she'd go on holiday, I'd see how other people were practicing, and just fell in love with the way that people interacted with their chiropractor and what it was like for them to be working. And I thought, this is really the kind of thing for me.
It certainly seems to be probably more of a go-to solution now than it was, say, 20, 30 years ago. Have you felt that as well?
It's interesting. There's definitely more of an awareness. More people seem to be aware of what's going on. I've known definitely within, when you meet people like at a barbecue or something like that and they find out you're a chiropractor, they used to react in two ways. Everybody always stands up taller because they're worried you're judging their posture is a big part of it. But they would either go, oh my God, I'm in love with my chiropractor, or oh, I had this situation happen, or people would react quite severely and strangely and kind of react negatively to it. More recently, though, I've found most people will go, oh, can I admit something to you? And I know what's coming when they say that now. And they're like, I'm just addicted to watching people get adjusted on TikTok.
That crack.
Yes, people can't get enough of watching people getting cracked on TikTok. And they're like, do you do that as well? And I'm like, that's what I do all day. Younger people seem to be being exposed to it in a different way to what they used to be. But still, I think it's roughly 10% of the population in Australia go to see chiropractors. There's about 400,000 visits a week of people going. So there's a lot of people, but for how much you hear about it and how much people know about chiropractors, it's not as many as I'd love to see going.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So in your practice, and you've been practicing for...
This is my 14th year, scarily enough.
Wow, goodness, I can't believe I've been coming to you for that long.
Yeah.
What are the types of, I guess, issues or ailments that you commonly see in your line of work?
So you see quite a lot of them. Obviously, back pain, headaches, neck pain, that's the really common stuff that you would see as a chiropractor. And some practices would see a lot of like sports injuries and things as well. And you do see quite a lot of that. I've been noticing a lot more in in the last few years especially, people coming in with more chronic pain problems. So fibromyalgia type of stuff or chronic fatigue type of things. People have been seeking something different from where they've been. But yeah, your real classic, the ones that you will see day in and day out, is the neck pain, low back pain, and things of that nature.
I really feel for people who suffer from things like fibromyalgia, where I would imagine they've had a lot of people tell them it's just in their head and they're not even a real thing. So it must be great. There must be some therapeutic effect of just coming to talk to someone who actually believes you.
It's actually scarily common. And if we're looking at the broader picture, fibromyalgia and things of that nature do tend to afflict women at higher rates, which, as we know, the evidence is coming out and people are talking about a lot in the media at the moment, that women's health in particular is incredibly neglected and misunderstood in general and very poorly managed across the board. So this isn't any particular group of people not doing it well. It's just been classic that people have gone, exactly as you said, oh, well, it's in your head. We've done the tests. There's nothing wrong with you. But the reality is for that person who's being affected by it is they're like, yeah, but I'm still in horrible pain, or I still don't have any energy, I can't focus, all of those sort of things. And the other thing I would say to that too is even if you, in a really, really basic sense, if you stepped on a nail and pierced through the bottom of your foot, the pain, your body registers damage, but the damage is registered as pain only in a certain section of your brain. So it's all in your head anyway. Whether you feel pain from having had something physical happen to you or not.
It's the reality.
It's the reality. And they know that because pain is mitigated by people's attitude, the environment they're in, or their emotional state at the time can affect how well people can manage pain. And so people get told, oh, it's all in your head. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't make it less real for how intensely uncomfortable it can be. And so what the challenge is for those people is to try and get that mismatch between what's happening in their body where it is, quote unquote, fine with no injury, and their brain perceiving things that shouldn't be causing them pain as causing them pain, and trying to marry those two things together again. So help the body connect better with the brain so that it can take better control of how things are and not perceive everything as being painful.
That's really interesting. So I just want to explore that a little bit further. So given that, what is the sort of science behind chiropractic that works to support that connection?
It's been classically kind of poorly explained to people because in the past you might have had a lot of people where they would make certain assumptions about how it would work. But at the end of the day, what we want to see is how well is somebody functioning. We want to measure how well can they move, how well can they interact with their environment, things like that. And at the end of the day, we need to get that function back. When a body is functioning better, it's going to feel better. It's going to perform better. It's going to be stronger, more resilient. So chiropractors would typically look towards the spine as being their main port of focus. As I said, sometimes you can do injuries around other parts of the body as well, as you well know with your running. Yeah. But with the science behind what we're doing is we're restoring the correct range of motion to areas that aren't moving as well as they should. And in doing so, then the body can make better decisions about how to move that area. And when you have better movement, you get better feedback through to your nervous system. Our body perceives lack of movement in a negative way. So if something is stuck, like the same as any other joint in your body, but around your spine especially, doesn't send feedback all the time that everything is okay and everything is well. And so it doesn't get that, what they call proprioceptive feedback, your body position sense. It gets what's called nociceptive feedback. So it's telling you about information that's either damage or potential damage. And so when your body is perceiving that instead of proprioceptive feedback, it starts to tighten up the area and starts to be less stable around through that area there. So if we can improve feedback to the nervous system by getting things moving in the appropriate way, in an appropriate way as well, like using techniques that help the body get back to it, not force the body back into something like that, then it can respond well and take better control of that area.
And you can't mention the word running, of course, without me picking up on that. This is something I really wanted to talk about because you're not only dealing with people who have pain and chronic issues, but you're also dealing with people who just want to be active and then have a setback where all of a sudden they're experiencing this pain and they don't know where it's come from. And you will know well, obviously, my background was running and that I'd get this recurring sort of hammy or glute issue and would be stretching my, backs of my legs and my hammies as much as possible and it just wouldn't go away. And then I'd come and see you for a couple of weeks or months and then just be completely pain-free miraculously. So can you talk about that kind of scenario and how that sort of realignment would address those sorts of issues?
So you kind of have three ways that people will usually interact with us. So we'll have some people who come in like you were describing there before, where I have this pain. Can you help me with this pain? Now that I'm no longer in pain, I'll see you when it comes back again. And that's where some people are at, and it's what they want to do, and it's how they like to interact with things, and that's always up to them, and it's great. Where we have most people within our practice, and I think it's something that a lot of people are kind of waking up and looking at very differently, is if you've had something like that, especially if it's happened for the fifth time, they're like, I'm sick of this happening now. Like, what can we do to not go backwards and get back into that? So then the focus becomes really different. It's not just how do we get the pain away, it's what can you then be doing, what behaviours and things can you be working on to try and move away from this situation and stop the recurrence of this type of thing happening. And then there are the people at the other side of that who've gone, well, now that I'm actually no longer having these problems coming back, so I'm not being held back so much, and I've been working on making my body more stable and having stronger range of motion and all of those sort of things, the other stuff is now easier and more enjoyable, and I'm not just doing the run that I always thought is what I wanted to do. Now I'm actually enjoying doing longer distances. And then you have people who I think are the kind of the most fun to have come into the practice, and similar to where you are now, where people are focused on performance. So they love to come in and go, they're like, I'm just going to stay on top of this. The same way, some people would, I just always get a massage. They now just know that life goes better while they're being actively looking at their healthcare. And so making sure that everything is moving really well.
Sorry to take you back to a dark place, but I remember coming to see you during lockdown.
Yeah.
And the types of, I guess, issues that people and myself were experiencing during that period were very different all of a sudden and very confusing.
Yes.
And also not entirely sure how much of it was related to the fact that we were just sitting around so much, or related to the fact that we were incredibly depressed, isolated and anxious all at the same time.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was really interesting. My expectation was that people's need for care was probably going to go down because everyone was isolated and, staying apart. But it was so many people reaching out for help. People's need for help was just so much higher. And it wasn't until you kind of in it, and, for anybody who's listening to this who doesn't necessarily remember, Melbourne had for quite some time the dubious record of having the longest lockdowns. What started as a 3-week flattening of the curve ended up being close to...
Snap lockdown?
Snap lockdown, yeah. It ended up being
later.
something like all up after some brief breaks in between. We ended up having something like 300 days of being in lockdown. And so there was so much uncertainty going on. People didn't know what was going to happen with their work. People who would normally have their relief would be things that they would do outside, and that's how they would look after themselves. All of a sudden you have a whole family that's in a house and they're not getting to do any of the things they would normally do, and their children aren't seeing their friends and all of that sort of stuff. So it was just it was a lot for people to be taking on. And the biggest thing that really stood out for me is, one, the sense of helplessness a lot of people had. And the other thing is that everything was bad news at the time. Like, I don't know whether people think about it anymore very much, but at the time, do you remember every day you would wake up and go, what were the numbers? What are our numbers? And we'd always be worried about, like, if it's too many numbers, we'll be in longer, but if it's good numbers, we'll be good. And, you're sitting there waiting for the sort of Damocles to drop down on you.
Hoping out against all hope.
Hoping out against all hope, yeah. Nothing was good news. And what I think is most important to remember when it's stress, whether our body is under a physical stress, an emotional stress, or a chemical stress, it reacts in the same way. And if you think about, our body's developed over millions of years to be really good at being hunter-gatherer cave people, and it's only really recently that we've started farming made pants and have dogs as pets. Like, this is only relatively really recent, and it's especially only relatively recent that we've had the world that we live in with computers and all of that sort of stuff. So if you think of your body responding the same way to everything that's stressful as being a cave person, getting a drink at a watering hole and a tiger turns up. So what happens when you see the tiger is you've only got a few options. So you're either going to freeze, which is not a really great one for survival, or you're going to go into fight or flight mode. And so the thing that's significant about fight or flight mode is they are both movement based. So you're either going to punch the tiger out and hope for the best, or you're going to run away from it. But either way, you have to move vigorously, and then you have to be alive on the other side of that for your body to go, oh, the tiger's gone now, and then calm down. But the difference was, especially when we were in lockdowns, is that the tiger lived on your shoulders all day, every day, and never went away, and for an extended period of time. And so the stress response in our body is designed to last for like 5, 10, 20 minutes while you're getting away from the tiger. And then on the other side of that, your body goes, okay, everything's okay, we can calm down, we can go back into our sympathetic mode where we're getting rest and digestion and all of that sort of stuff. But what happens is our nervous system quite correctly goes, well, there's a tiger here. There's a bunch of things that are no longer relevant for me to work on. I have to put all of my energy into getting away from or killing this tiger. So it immediately sees anything that you're using lots of energy for that's not useful in that exact moment and tries to stop you doing that. So it'll downregulate your ability to get good nutrition out of your food, because there's not much point getting any nutrition out of lunch if you're dead before the next 10 minutes. So it downregulates your digestive tract. Your immune system is another one that takes a lot of energy. Like, that's the reason we feel so horrible when we have a cold. Even though it's a relatively mild condition, we feel horrible because our immune system takes so much energy to run. So your body goes, well, I'm not going to get over this cold if I'm dead by the tiger right now. And so if you think about the things that happen to people when they're under chronic stress, or you think about the things that are really endemic in modern life with people, would you say largely are people getting sick more often or getting over their colds as easily as they should? No, people get colds and they linger for forever because they're never getting that full opportunity to calm things down. Are there more digestive issues in not just young people, but people in general than there ever have been before? I would argue my experience has been yes.
Yeah.
And then
declining fertility rates.
Decline in fertility rates. And it's men and women. And, the focus of so much fertility work is always on women. And yet it is men that it's happening with as well. So I found that during that period, you would have people whose bodies were just under stress so chronically. I had some clients who were just like, if I don't speak to you, I'm not going to speak to anybody.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to see anybody for this long a period of time. And they're like, I'm going crazy. And it was really quite horrible for them because it really emphasised how alone some people were as well.
Exaggerated and amplified it even more.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
And I mean, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on this podcast and for this episode is your insight into linking emotional pain, emotional stress, and physical stress, physical pain. Yep. That's that whole mind-body connection. And there's a whole another episode coming on that one. So we'll try to stay on track here. But that is something I really want to perhaps in a future episode talk a lot more about, because you can't separate them.
No, and I often say to people, they come in and they're like, do you think what's going on with me at the moment could have something to do with the back pain? And it's, in the entire time I've been practicing, I have never had somebody come in and go, Kieran, my family are the best. They're so healthy. You wouldn't believe how good they all are. I feel great. My work is wonderful. I've got too much money, if anything. Also, my back hurts. It's never happened. It's never happened in the history of ever. Yeah. There's always other factors that will contribute to it. And you just see it play out. Like, everyone has a friend who's always getting injured or things of that nature. You see it. You know it in them. You can hear the stress in them always. Yes. There's always that. There's these parts to it, and you classically hear, and it's the worst time for it to happen too. Yes. Or, it's happened to me. Of course it happened to me when I've got all of this going on as well. Yeah. As expected. It's the next big problem I was going to have. They just can't be separated out from each other. Yeah.
Talking about moving in unnatural or not natural ways, let's talk about devices and being on our devices and how that impacts our posture and our backs and our physical health. Yeah.
It's been really interesting, and I know I've discussed this with you before because you do have teenagers, but when I was at uni, you would talk about the hunch that there was a nickname for a condition they'd call the dowager's hump. And the dowager, for anyone who's not quite sure, is a widow, and the idea was that you would have an older lady who'd outlived her husband and now she sat at home not doing very much, and she'd develop a hunch in her upper back. So that was its nickname. And so obviously it's got other technical terms, but everybody knows who I'm talking about when I say that. And that was the nickname when I was at uni, and I graduated in 2010. And it's fair to say, technologically wise, things have changed quite a bit in that period of time, and how we interact with our phones, how we interact with everything. And now the nickname for it is eye hunch. And the sort of changes that when I was at uni we were learning you would look for on an x-ray with somebody and their posture, the sort of changes you would be seeing in their 50s, 60s and beyond, we're now seeing it in people in their late 20s, early 30s. And if you think of it even, so for someone like me, who's still very young.
Yes, very young listeners out there,
but if you think of the world that I grew up in, I would use a computer. I'm old enough to know dial-up internet, so I would use a computer when it wasn't going to interfere with someone being on the phone. And you would be at school, you would still be just, everything was done handwritten. And then you would go to the computer labs to go and be in the computer.
And it was always freezing cold in there.
And it was always freezing cold. And it was always a desktop. There was never, it was not really laptops. And you especially didn't have a tablet of any description. And even if you did, there would have been nothing to look at. But, what happens to people's posture who are now in their late 30s, early 40s, if they've been in an office environment, they've been doing it since they're kind of early to mid-20s, so they're kind of 10, 15, 20 years in, and you look at people's postures over that time where they're seeing their heads dropping forward, that's the sort of changes that you're seeing in people. They were fully formed adults by the time they started spending 8 hours a day sitting. And now if you go back, even if you were a child who wasn't that active, and I didn't play heaps of sport or anything when I was younger, but it never sat anywhere for 8 hours. You'd only watch TV shows after school while the kids' TV shows were on, and then you'd be off and you'd be doing something else usually. Whereas now, everything is the entertainment based from a tablet, and they're designed so that 3-year-olds can know how to use them. And this is not a judgment on anybody having kids using iPads. I personally would look at it and go, it'd be impossible for them not to. But it's just the time that people spend on it. And if you think of the position that people are in, it's different to when you're sitting at a computer screen in an office. You're leaning down and forward, and for every centimetre that your head is forward from where it should be, it greatly increases the perceived weight of your head as it's going forward. So when you've got a developing spine, so somebody in their 8, 9, 10 years old going through in their teens when they would normally be developing their spine with movement and a more upright posture, they're developing their spine in a posture that is more in a C shape than anything else. So that's why we're seeing late teens with loss of neck curve. And
that is absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, it is
horrifying.
It is. And it's one of those things that if you need to know inherently how good having good posture is, think of every sports person, every professional level elite sports person in the world of any description. They all stand perfectly. Even basketball players, and they're way too tall for how the world is ergonomically built, so you would naturally think that they'd have to stoop to be able to get. But all basketball players have got this perfect posture, and it's because that's where they can have stronger and better range of motion of their shoulders. They're less likely to injure themselves. They have better range of motion of their neck. So it's when you see people walking around with their head sitting forward over their shoulders, it's a real sign that their body is just having to work so much harder to get them through the day than, as I said, we're seeing it starting to see it with kids, but definitely with teenagers.
Wow. So let's talk about some habits to correct that awful bleak view of the
I don't mean to be bleak. I don't mean to be bleak. So there are...
It's just, things to be aware of and conscious of, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it's what I wanted this podcast series to be useful for everyday people. The fact of the matter is we do have to sit in cars. We do have to sit at our desks. We are,
absolutely,
despite all the best intention, live too sedentary a life. And even getting up and doing your hour of exercise in the morning, you think, well, I've ticked that box and now I'm fine. But you should still be conscious of it throughout the day. So what are some of the things that we should be doing or aware of? What are some of the good habits that we should be putting in place to protect our postures?
So that's the thing. I want to make it really clear that I find a lot of people get disheartened because they think, but I have to do these things. I have to do these things. And I totally understand that. We've got to pay for stuff. We've got to pay for somewhere to live. So we all have to work, and work for a lot of people is going to be a real limiting factor in terms of how much time they get to get up. So what we need to do is make the most of whatever environment we're in. And the thing to remember is there's always improvement that can be had. And so, yes, you have to work on a computer, so you might lose 3 hours without realising it. It's when you realise it, then do anything to step it in the right direction. So one of the things I like to point out to people is that there's no point pretending that from this day onwards, I'm never going to sit at a desk. I'm never going to look at a screen. It's never going to happen. That's just not how the reality of it is. So the main thing I would tell people is identify what the changes are that you're wanting to make and make a slight variation of your current existence towards that. So if you change something important about your life, so how often you would stand up and move and stretch, or how often you actually book in to go and see a chiropractor and be looking after yourself, or whatever your particular thing is, if you change that behavior by 1 or 2 degrees, it's not going to feel like that massive a change. But over the space of the next 35 years, it will take you to a completely different destination.
It's that compounding effect.
It's the compounding effect of those small changes. And so that's, the biggest thing I find is people kind of go, well, if I haven't got the ability to overhaul my entire life, then I'm not going to bother.
What's the point?
Yeah, but make those changes. One of the other things that I think is really important for people, one of the habits is to get a team of people around you to be working in the same direction as you are. So get health practitioners, whether it's your GP, it's the whole group of everybody, the GP, chiropractor, Chinese medicine, acupuncture, whoever it is that you're seeing. Get a group of people around you that are all across what you're trying to do and where you're wanting to go. And so that's an important one, because when you're giving advice like this, it's so generalized because you'll have a lot of listeners and everyone's life is going to be that bit different. You want people who know you and know what's important to you and what you're about, and then support you in doing that. Try and find things that you enjoy doing that are not involving looking at a screen. So one is listening to podcasts. You can do that and definitely don't have to be looking at anything. But it's getting ourselves away from that screen and taking that time away from it is a really big one. It's just those little things that you decide to be doing every day. And I think one of the other ones that's a big one for me is take your stress seriously and recognize that it's okay. Everything is stressful. Not everything is as stressful as perhaps losing a loved one or going through a breakup or anything like that, but everything is a level of stress. And for some reason in today's society, everybody really glorify being busy. So, you're busy at work and it really fries you out. So then you go home and then this weekend you've got 18 different things you have to be doing.
Make some space.
Exactly, make some space. Make some space. And it's to do kind of anything, but it's to focus on you or focus on you and the family or whatever it is that brings that space for you. And I see the practice is full of people who are overscheduled. And there's, for some reason, people have that real good on them. They're so busy and they're getting it all done. It's like, yeah, but would they be happier and healthier if they... Because you can still be getting important things done while also looking after yourself. And that's where I think that kind of 1950s mindset of like, I'm just going to keep on pushing through and... Like, it's rubbish. And it's just been proven to be so bad for people. So, it's just people should be glorifying the idea of doing a lot less so that they can take that space and actually enjoy what they do and doing it slowly.
Be there for their families. Be present. Be available. Have energy. Have patience for the people that they love.
Yeah.
So let's talk about you for a second. This is a question I've always wanted to ask, actually, with you adjusting people, and it's a very physical day that you have, leaning over people and moving them around. How do you look after your back, your posture? How are you at the end of a full week of that?
So it's actually really interesting. I've found that the busier that I am in practice, the better I feel by the end of the week because it's all movement. And when it's a really quiet week, I'll sit down in between. And, then the temptation is you pull your phone out because you're going to get these 5 jobs done and all of that sort of stuff. Or there's something that someone sent you and you look at it. So I end up actually feeling more tired when it's quiet and I'll feel a little bit worse, but I get adjusted myself. But there's always try to be as considered as possible. So what I want is to be able to keep doing what I'm doing for the next, also it's the reality of what I might have to do, but it's keep doing what I'm doing for the next 40 years. And so I need a body that's going to be able to stand up to that. So I then do try to focus outside of there of doing other things that are going to be helping to work on my posture. So I do lie back on foam rollers to get my head back over the top of my shoulders, open up my shoulders and be able to just breathe and be more comfortable that way. And I'm really also quite mindful. That's one of the other things is I try to be very mindful of what is my body doing. And if I do start to, because I also get sore sometimes, it might be that I've overdone something with exercise, or when I'm in the practice, I might be like, well, my low back just went to grab there. I would then very seriously monitor how I'm moving and alter what I'm doing in that sense until I know, all right, I've gone and had somebody look after it for me, or I've gone to do some work to get that moving again. Yeah. So, yeah, the big ones for me is when I'm not in the practice, I try to prioritise downtime, whether that's with exercise or time spent with my wife and our dogs and that sort of thing. But we do try to prioritise just kind of recharging ourselves. So then when I'm in the practice, all I need to think about is just being in practice and the people that are there in front of me.
I love the analogy of, fit your own oxygen mask before attending to other
exactly.
passengers.
That is it, exactly.
And it just helps me get over the mother's guilt of when I go out for a long run or, take some time for myself, because you do feel guilty or away from your family. But you have to remind yourself that they're better off if you're happy and you're healthy, and that's what we have to keep in front of mind.
And the other thing in that too, when we're looking at people's behaviours, is people generally learn how to interact with the world from looking at the people closest to them. So not in every case, obviously, but in most cases that would be looking at your parents. And so if you're there as a parent and you go, I'm just going to put myself aside here and I'm going to just focus on what my children want, I'm never going to do any of the things for me, it's a noble concept. But what you're training your children to believe is that you should never look after yourself and you should only be looking after these other things. And it doesn't matter if you have these other problems coming up, because you just don't deal with your own problems, only deal with other people. Yeah. And it's like a recipe for disaster. And it's inspiring for kids to see parents who are still out and exercising, because if you think of the standard, it would be, I used to be really fit when I was a teenager, but then you have kids and then you just put on a big gut.
I'm too busy and I just don't have time.
I'm too busy, I'm so busy. And also, people my age don't exercise like that. That's rubbish. That's absolute rubbish. There's that 93-year-old German lady that's doing gymnastics still the other day. She moves like a woman in her 30s. Incredible. She's amazing. She just didn't want to listen when people said, you're too old for that. She was like, no, I'm not.
A friend of mine goes for a swim every morning.
Yep.
And there's a woman, and he thinks she's also in her 70s. She's there every day.
Yep.
Doing her swim. She gets out, she has a little jog with the dogs. One day he stopped her and he said, how do you do this every day? It's freezing.
Yep.
And she looked at him and she said, if I don't do this, I'm impossible. And I totally got it. She's not enjoying it because she loves the freezing cold. She enjoys it because it's how she is the best version of herself going into the day.
I love that.
This is just a great
story.
Good.
Yeah. It's such an inspiring mindset of it, where lovely. It's not about the torture.
It's not about it's about the reward.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been so lovely chatting with you, and definitely so much more to talk about. So I hope we can entice you to come back for another episode and deep dive into some of the other topics we've chatted about and touched on. So, and thank you for all the years of conversation. And as I said, the reason I wanted to talk to you is whenever I came in to see you for an adjustment, it wasn't just the adjustment. I knew that I'd be getting the holistic approach on me as a human being and my overall well-being. So that's, I guess, why I've chosen to have you on the episode today.
Oh, it's incredibly humbling. I'm going to say I'm a little bit kind of touched there. It's been an honour to be able to be on, and I'm really excited about the podcast. But it means a lot to get to care for people, because that's, and it is my work and it's the thing that I do. But to hear that it means that to you, it means a lot to me. So thank you for saying that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thanks for having me on.
The information in this episode is intended as general information only. As a registered health practitioner, Dr. Whelan suggests that it's essential to consult with your own healthcare professionals for personalised health advice. Kieran does not advocate unnecessary or indiscriminate use of health intervention and says that you should only undergo any form of healthcare if there is clinical justification to do so. You've been listening to For Your Life podcast, produced by Sound Cartel. Subscribe free to For Your Life wherever you're listening now.